So I'm here tonight to talk to you about a very new research initiative that we are just about to begin at the Partnership on AI. It is called AI and Shared Prosperity Initiative. I want to present it in hopes that some of you will be interested enough to pick up some of the questions that I'm going to be talking about in your own research, or maybe join forces with us, or maybe even apply to be a research fellow at the Partnership on AI. We're currently hiring fellows for this specific initiative. I'll provide all the details at the end of my talk, or you can just browse the careers page of the Partnership on AI. Before I talk about the initiative itself, let me talk a little bit about the motivation of where it came from. So if you've been following the responsible AI space in the last 3 or 4 years, you've probably noticed dozens and dozens and dozens organizations have published responsible AI principles. Governments did that, private sector companies did that, multilateral civil society organizations have all done that, which is really great and something one cannot not welcome, especially at a time like this, when COVID has really laid bare and exacerbated structural inequalities that exist in our society. And in front of our eyes, decades of poverty reduction efforts around the world are being undone. At times like this, it's especially important to remember that many of the organizations that published AI principles, they've explicitly recognized the power of AI to redistribute wealth and economic opportunity within the society. And many organizations explicitly said that this power should not be used to exacerbate inequality, but instead of that, to advance shared prosperity and to support inclusive growth and sustainable development. All of these are really important principles, but if you take a step back for a second and think about how to actually implement them in practice, that might give you a pause, because it's not at all, the answer to that, it's not at all obvious. And if you are, for example, an AI developer or an industry actor, you want to use this power that AI has to redistribute the economic opportunity responsibly. There is not that much research that can help guide your decisions that you can turn to. As a matter of fact, if I were to summarize the future of work debate and academic research very crudely, it really takes technology as a given, and it mostly addresses governments and society with its recommendations. There are people who disagree on whether we are marching towards doom and gloom of technological unemployment or a future of complete abundance, but by and large, they do agree that the transition on the way to whatever future is waiting for us will be hard for many people, and many people might get left behind. But the responses to that are being widely discussed, they range from lifelong learning and retraining to UBI and strengthening social safety nets, which are all responses that are being asked of the recipients of change. We're not asking of that much from the designers of change that are actually in the position of power. And there is something off about that, and something that is something that we would love to address specifically with the AI and Shared Prosperity Initiative. It is an initiative that's not only a research effort, but it's also a paradigm shift effort. We want to reframe the conversation and look at it not from a point of complacency, say about AI potentially leaving a lot of people behind and calling for the society to adjust, but asking instead the question of how the path of AI, the direction of AI, can be steered to, by design, people who have fewest resources to make adjustment themselves. So the current situation can be interpreted as a byproduct of user-centered design that has been popular in the last decades, where you find a market and you design for the need of specific group of users. But what can happen when you are focused on those needs is that the redistributive impacts that have effects on other groups can get overlooked. So what would it look like, and what would it be like in practice to be aware of those redistributional impacts while we are designing and deploying technology? And so this is exactly the focus of the AI and Shared Prosperity Initiative, that as its goal has creation of practical guidance for private sector actors to handle the redistributive power of AI responsibly. As a developer who wants to think about the redistribution of economic opportunity and economic impacts, some of the questions that you would be asking yourself have to do with whether you're enhancing or undermining the value of human labor with your innovation, and whether you're shifting the relative demand for skills away from people without a college degree and towards people with elite education, which might be exacerbating inequality, especially in countries where educational attainment correlates with wealth and income of parents. Then you might also, if you are based out of a rich country, you might also be asking yourself questions about whether the innovation you're working on is going to be deployed as well in other countries where their main development challenge might be the generation of gainful employment opportunities for millions of young people without college degrees that are entering the workforce every year, and whether the deployment of your product there might be making this challenge more difficult and less tractable. This is by no means an exhaustive list of questions, and the initiative is definitely going to be expanding on those, but the overarching principle that we believe is very important in this work is that any kind of responsible approach to thinking about economic consequences of AI development and deployment must meaningfully involve workers. And this is why the initiative itself is going to be collaborating very closely with workers from automation-prone professions to both shape and inform the research agenda of the initiative as well as the research outputs themselves. Speaking of research outputs, the way we are imagining them right now is all around creating an infrastructure for thinking about the economic impacts of AI from the point of view of private sector specifically. So, for example, as a private sector actor, as a developer of AI, what concrete objective can you as a company adopt if you would like to advance shared prosperity and make sure your innovation does not deepen inequality? How do you even measure progress towards an objective that you set up? And practically speaking, what are the tools, policies, frameworks that you can adopt and make part of your development process to start making progress towards an objective like that? And then this community in particular might be asking a question about why should we at all think deliberately about steering the direction of AI? Doesn't it sound very interventionist? And why can't we just rely on the market forces to define that direction for us? And there are a number of reasons why the market might not lead us to the outcomes of shared prosperity, might actually be deepening inequality. And I'm listing some of them and citing the research from famous economists at the bottom of the slide, which I highly encourage you to check out in your free time. Those are all wonderful, wonderful reads. There's one that I'd like to highlight in particular. It's the last point. If we make it conditional for people to be able to benefit from AI advancement, if we make it conditional on them continuously updating their skills, keeping them current and catching up with AI, then we basically declare that we are completely out of touch with the reality of global learning crisis around the world and the reality of how difficult it has been to improve learning outcomes around the world. That is not to say that we should not be trying to improve those. It's absolutely a very, very critical effort, but we should also be realistic about making technology and education race. It is important that technological progress actually empowers and expands the economic opportunity of people who are less privileged, as opposed to taking it away from them. Why would we even call it technological progress if this is what it does? There are many other reasons why not just let the market make all of the decisions on our behalf, which hopefully we can touch more on in the Q&A. And I want to conclude by saying that we are definitely in the very, very beginning of this effort. We would love for people who are interested in pursuing some of these questions or who have opinions for us and advice for us on how to pursue this work to get in touch with us. Please use the contact form on our website or ping me on Twitter. We're also hiring research fellows to work on the Shared Prosperity Initiative. Here is the link to the career page. We would love to receive applications from you.